And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason. Please stop using that phrase you're talking about because you don't understand what you're saying. You're saying about yourself that, you know, hey, that's a terrible thing to be. It's not a terrible thing to be. That's why we fought.
Karoline Leavitt is the press secretary at the White House, doing a great job. Such a great job that the ladies of The View feel the green monster coming upon them. They really don't like this woman. She's a good communicator.
It started like a normal day on The View. The hosts were in their usual seats, sipping coffee, tossing around jokes, and flashing those big daytime television smiles. But behind the cameras, something massive was brewing. Karoline Leavitt, the sharp-tongued, media-trained press secretary for Donald Trump, had just dropped a legal bombshell on the network.
The fact that his bond...
Hold on, sir. I have to stop you with the camera because I can see you. So do me a favor, don't pull it out again.
Not a complaint, not a press release, a full-on lawsuit for $800 million. And this wasn't some wild stunt. It was real, detailed, backed by evidence, and aimed directly at the heart of ABC and its crown jewel talk show.
Democrats and the media are now unloading all their nasty attacks on rising Trump White House star and new press secretary, Karoline Leavitt.
They have mocked him, they have shamed him, they have lied about him consistently on their show. And it was a joy to watch them on November the 6th when they realized that tens of millions of Americans do not listen to the lies that they have spewed. These women are completely out of touch with reality. And you're right, ABC should wake up.
Just weeks earlier, Whoopi, Joy, and Sunny were mocking her on air like she was just another conservative punching bag, rolling their eyes, laughing her off, shrugging, "We've seen worse." But now, those same women were sitting under the studio lights with smiles that looked more like grimaces. They had no idea the storm they'd unleashed.
You do know that you're walking into hostile territory, right?
Certainly do. And look, I think I'm well prepared for that. And I'm incredibly honored that President Trump has instilled confidence in me to speak on his behalf behind the White House podium. It's been an honor to have a front row seat to the greatest political comeback in history. And as you mentioned in your monologue, Sean, President Trump is putting together a brilliant cabinet of fantastic America First fighters, from Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are going to cut the waste out of our federal bureaucracy, to Susie Wiles, who is going to serve as the first female chief of staff in history. Take that, Mark Cuban, to Tom Homan. No one better to secure the border than him.
Karoline didn't flinch, didn't rant, didn't even raise her voice. She played it cold, professional, calculated. And she wasn't alone. She had a brutal legal team behind her that wasn't just chasing headlines, they were chasing accountability.
There's too much BS floating out there, and now it's out of our hands. There's no way to control it, so now they're saying they're going to control it. I want to see what they're going to do.
By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now let's continue. At first, ABC didn't take it seriously. In fact, behind the scenes, executives were still chuckling about it during morning Zoom calls.
Left pretends to be a champion of women until they find one who is a conservative. Once that happens, they love nothing more than tearing down women with the most petty and vacuous of insults.
One even said, "We've dealt with worse," while barely looking up from their coffee. But by midweek, that confidence collapsed. Panic set in. Legal teams were suddenly on speed dial. Emergency meetings started filling up the calendar. The tone flipped from smug to scared. Everyone realized this wasn't a bluff. Karoline had receipts, and not just one or two. She had a mountain of them: emails, video archives, production notes. Things people thought were buried deep or deleted were now surfacing.
Leavitt appears to be a fierce operator, but she's also 27 and arguably quite glamorous. So of course, the kind and progressive voices at The View reacted to her appointment like this.
All right.
What'd she say?
She basically said that they were going to give
Oh,
unqualified,
God, how boring.
unqualified
Can they get
people
somebody there
jobs.
not
The
so
Behind the
tedious?
Table podcast needs to apply for White House credentials.
They'd love having Joy in that room.
Joy
So
can
I
go.
got a question. So wait a second. So in other words, instead of Bob Woodward, they want Kim Kardashian? What? I don't get it.
Okay.
And the lawsuit wasn't just about something said during one episode. It accused The View of running a coordinated smear campaign against her. This wasn't accidental. According to her legal team, it was planned, targeted, scripted even before she ever stepped on set. And now, ABC was scrambling to keep up.
And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason.
Editors were ordered to pull every bit of raw footage. Producers got emails asking if they remembered certain segments. Even interns were getting questioned. Some staff members quietly started contacting lawyers just in case. A few even deleted old texts. It was all happening fast, and ABC could barely keep its head above water.
Has gone woke, and now they have gone broke. They have their lowest approval ratings ever, and they are rallying around two of the most far-left leaders in their party, AOC and Jasmine Crockett. So that tells you the current state of the Democrat Party.
Karoline, meanwhile, silent. Not a single tweet. Not one press interview. Just the sound of her legal team turning the screws in total silence. While ABC was spinning in chaos, Karoline's team was moving with deadly precision. No noise, no media circus, just a quiet avalanche behind the scenes. They weren't watching just one episode of The View. They pulled everything. Archived footage, off-air moments, producer notes, old email chains.
How do you think voters are going to react when they see something like that on TV?
Voters do not agree with these despicable women on The View. They are wildly out of touch with the vast majority of Americans, and frankly, they should seek immediate help.
They were cataloging every smirk, every sarcastic jab, every so-called off-the-cuff remark. It wasn't about one insult, it was about a pattern, a strategy. Then came the turning point, the leaks. First, internal Slack messages from The View's own team surfaced, and they weren't just embarrassing, they were explosive. One read, Joy should press her hard on the youth angle, get her flustered early. Another one said, cut to audience reactions when she stutters. These weren't harmless production notes. They were instructions, coordinated tactics to make her stumble on live television. But the real shock came from a handwritten note found in a producer's planning notebook. It said, let her dig her own grave. Just ask about Trump. She'll spiral. That was the moment it all changed. This wasn't just aggressive interviewing. This was premeditated. It painted The View not as a talk show, but as a hit job factory disguised as morning television. The laughter that once filled the studio, gone. Now those clips were being replayed in legal briefings, network boardrooms, and courtroom prep meetings. No applause, no laughter, just cold, terrified silence. And that silence? It started creeping onto the set. The next time The View aired, everything looked the same on the surface. Same bright lights, same familiar faces, but something was off. The energy was stiff. Jokes felt forced. The banter? Practically gone. Whoopi sat upright, hands clenched, face tense. No relaxed smirk. Just this tight, uneasy stare. Then she spoke, low and controlled. Things have gotten a little out of hand. Maybe we need to take a step back. For longtime viewers, it was chilling. This wasn't the bold, sarcastic Whoopi they were used to. This was someone under pressure. Then Joy Behar spoke, and her voice cracked. She didn't make a joke. She didn't smirk. She looked down for a second and simply said, I don't know why this had to go so far. Can't we just talk? No punchline. Just fear. That moment hit hard. Sunny Hostin leaned in next. The so-called legal brain of the show, always quick to shut things down with a smirk or a quip, but this time no bravado. She looked straight into the camera and said, Karoline, if you're watching, maybe there's a better way to solve this. It wasn't leadership. It wasn't strength. It felt like surrender. And Karoline, still silent, watching, waiting. letting their panic become the main headline. Backstage, things were spiraling even faster. ABC's top brass had officially moved into full-blown crisis mode. Legal teams were flooding inboxes. Editors were being told to hand over everything: scripts, drafts, emails, unused footage. Nobody was safe. Not the junior producers. Not even the interns who just ran coffee. Everyone was being pulled into closed-door meetings and grilled. And the craziest part? Karoline's team hadn't even started the discovery phase yet. That's the part of the lawsuit where both sides are forced to hand over every document, every message, every video. No hiding, no deleting, just exposure. Real, raw, brutal exposure. Once ABC realized what was coming, the fear spread like wildfire. HR memos that had been ignored were suddenly being read out loud. One internal warning from 6 months earlier said, "I'm concerned." Recent interviews with younger conservative guests feel overly aggressive, borderline targeted. Another one bluntly stated, "There's a pattern of strategic tension creation." Unclear if it's personal bias or editorial direction. These weren't one-off complaints. They were warnings, red flags, and ABC had ignored them. Now, those same notes were being printed, highlighted, and passed around conference rooms. Executives who once mocked Karoline were suddenly flying in legal experts, PR teams, crisis managers trying to plug a ship that was already sinking. And through it all, Karoline still hadn't said a word. As the pressure kept rising, ABC's staff started cracking. Some producers quietly contacted their own lawyers, preparing for the worst. A few were seen deleting old text threads, trying to clean up conversations they hoped no one would ever read. Group chats were suddenly full of people nervously asking, "Do you remember what we said about her?" But it was too late. Karoline's team didn't need to shout. They didn't need to go on television. Their silence was the warning. A cold, calculated silence that had ABC sweating bullets. Then it happened. One executive, visibly shaken, leaned over to a colleague and whispered, "It's like she already won, and we're just waiting for the paperwork." That's how deep the fear went. Leaks were hitting the internet daily. Internal clips, email screenshots, private notes. It just kept coming. Legal floated the idea of a quiet settlement, cut a check, keep it out of the headlines. But the PR department slammed the brakes. "If we pay her," they said, "we're basically admitting guilt." But the bigger fear wasn't paying. The bigger fear was, what if Karoline refused the money? Because this wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. This was war. And ABC, they were getting torn apart, minute by minute. The network built on bold talk and strong opinions was now paralyzed by one quiet, relentless opponent. By the time the co-hosts were finally fully briefed on the chaos happening behind the scenes, the damage was already done. Emails were out, footage was leaked, planning documents had surfaced. They weren't being blindsided, they were being buried. Whoopi Goldberg? She didn't walk into that emergency meeting, she stormed in, fresh off the set, makeup half done, towel still in hand. She slammed the door behind her and snapped, "We're seriously thinking about cutting a deal with her?" Executives tried to explain the situation, the evidence, the legal exposure. But Whoopi wasn't hearing any of it. She slammed her hand on the table again. "We're making her look like a hero." Her voice was sharp, furious. "You think Twitter's bad now? Just wait until they find out we paid her off." The room went silent. Then Joy Behar spoke up, no jokes this time, just fire. "We built this show," she hissed. "We carried this network through elections, scandals, shutdowns, and now we fold over one lawsuit?" All eyes turned to Sunny Hostin, the legal brain at the table, the fixer. Everyone was waiting for her to give them a way out. But instead, she slid the printed lawsuit back across the table and whispered, "She has enough to go to court." That changed everything. In that one moment, they all knew this wasn't just a personal problem. It was a network-wide catastrophe. Years of behind-the-scenes drama and unchecked behavior were about to be dragged straight into the spotlight. Whoopi leaned in, eyes sharp and voice low. "You're saying we should apologize?" she asked. But Sunny didn't answer. She didn't have to. The look on her face said it all. For the first time, The reality hit everyone in that room. They were cornered. And the next morning, it showed. The show opened like usual, but nothing felt normal. There were no playful jabs, no sarcastic intros. The air was thick. You could feel the tension bleeding through the screen. Whoopi stared straight into the camera, took a slow breath, and said, "Things have gotten a little out of hand. Maybe we need to take a step back." That's it. No smirk, no chuckle. Just a cold, awkward truth. Joy looked shaken. Not fake emotional for TV shaken. Real. Her voice was soft. Her eyes kept dropping to the table. I don't know why this had to go so far. Can't we just talk? No punchline. No laugh track. Just regret. Sunny followed, her gaze locked onto the camera. Karoline, if you're watching, maybe there's a better way to solve this. Again, no witty comeback. No legal posturing. Just plain raw words. 3 women, 3 public pleas. No script, no applause. And for once, no control. This wasn't strength. This was survival mode. They were trying to stop a tidal wave after it had already hit. And Karoline? She stayed silent. No tweet, no statement, nothing. Because she didn't have to say anything. They were doing it for her live, on national television. While the hosts tried to soften their image on air, outside the studio the damage was exploding. Clips from the episodes spread across the internet like wildfire. Within minutes, TikTok, X, and Instagram were flooded with side-by-side edits, one week showing the hosts mocking Karoline with smug jokes, the next week begging for peace with shaky voices. It didn't look like reconciliation, it looked like fear. One viral tweet summed it up perfectly. If you weren't guilty, you wouldn't be begging. Hashtags like #Karoline_was_right, #ViewMeltdown, #receipts_don't_lie, and #media accountability were trending globally. Meme pages had a field day. One showed Whoopi's face next to a sinking ship with the caption, "Captain goes down with the view." Another had Joy clutching a legal binder with panic in her eyes, and the text, "When the roast session turns into a deposition." Even TikTok creators broke it down frame by frame. Whoopi's stiff posture, Joy's cracked voice, Sunny's forced calm. People weren't watching a talk show anymore, they were watching a collapse, dissected in real time. Behind the scenes, things were even worse. Advertisers started pulling out no press releases, just quiet disappearances. Staffers were refreshing their resumes. Some began sending feelers to other networks. Leaked memos showed the panic growing inside ABC. Subject lines read like, "Sirens," "Reputational risk," "Escalation," "Contingency strategy." One executive even said out loud what everyone was thinking, "Maybe we just shut it all down." Because this wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a full-scale brand collapse, a network reckoning, and it was all happening live. As pressure kept mounting inside ABC, the panic wasn't just limited to producers and hosts anymore. It had spread across the entire building like a virus. People who had nothing to do with The View were now being pulled into the fallout. HR teams were reviewing years-old complaints. Mid-level staff were being dragged into conference rooms, asked what they remembered from segments that aired months, even years ago. Some were stunned. Others were terrified. Everyone felt it. No one was safe. Junior staffers, who used to sit quietly in production meetings, suddenly found themselves under the microscope. Were you present when this note was written? Did you hear that conversation off camera? Even interns were being asked to recount what snacks the hosts had in the green room that day, anything that could help or hurt someone's case. The building was in full lockdown mode. Staff vacations were canceled. Phones were confiscated during meetings. Internal messaging apps were being monitored. ABC wasn't trying to fix things anymore. They were just trying to stop the bleeding. Producers who once brushed off legal risks as part of the job were now whispering about protecting themselves. One of them reportedly walked out of a meeting pale-faced, muttering, "I didn't know they were actually documenting it all." But Karoline did. She had the footage, the transcripts, the receipts, everything. Meanwhile, the PR team was drowning. They tried crafting statements, floating apologies, softening the public image of the show, but every attempt looked worse than the last. Every smile on air looked forced. Every apology sounded rehearsed. And the internet? It wasn't buying a second of it. More leaks surfaced, emails marked confidential, private group chats between producers, even audio clips from planning calls. One message literally said, "Let her spin out. We'll cut it into clips that go viral." That line alone was enough to send the legal team into a frenzy. The tension got so bad, some staff began staging quiet exits, taking sick leave, resigning without notice, disappearing from Slack channels. The few who stayed were walking on eggshells. ABC wasn't dealing with a guest who got offended. They were dealing with someone who walked in, got disrespected, and returned with a legal army. And now the house of cards they'd built on snark and sarcasm was falling fast. Karoline never had to break a sweat. She didn't need to clap back. She knew the weight of the truth was already doing the work for her. And the scariest part for ABC? She was just getting started. ABC had always been the powerhouse behind The View, a show that survived elections, scandals, walkouts, and controversies. But this was different. This wasn't just bad PR. This was the kind of crisis that hits every level of the building. Emergency meetings were now happening twice a day. Executives weren't even pretending to manage it anymore. They were just trying to contain the fallout. Staff were told to turn over everything. Old scripts, B-roll, backstage footage, even personal notes. No more hiding. The worst part? This wasn't even the courtroom phase yet. Karoline's legal team hadn't started discovery, hadn't even opened the real playbook, and ABC was already in chaos. Some higher-ups whispered the unthinkable, "We need to rebrand." Others went darker, "What if we just pull the plug, end the show before this takes the whole network with it?" Because the truth was clear. The lawsuit wasn't just about Karoline's image. It was about the years of unchecked behavior, mocking, baiting, belittling guests who didn't align with their views. And now that mountain of smugness, swept under the rug for so long, was erupting. Karoline didn't yell. She didn't do press tours. She didn't post threads or start hashtags. She waited, quietly, while the walls crumbled on their own. And then came the statement. Just one line. "We are moving forward as planned." No extra words, no spin, just cold, clean precision. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.